NVIDIA. So, let's speak about what's going on here with NVIDIA, and I'll tell you if I'm about to start buying the stock now at this point in time, and, everything in regards to that. First off, check this out. I mean, this is a, are you kidding me? An NVIDIA event has George Lucas and Kendrick Lamar and Nas and Trevor Noah and Ashton Kutcher and all these folks at it. That's just crazy. You think about that for a moment. It's an NVIDIA event, and you got these sorts of folks showing up for it. That's big time. Check this out here. This puts it into context, right? I saw this on X out there. The NVIDIA, it had to rent out an arena for this event. You couldn't even get hotel rooms anywhere remotely close. Everywhere was sold out. It was where the San Jose Sharks play. I mean, that's just incredible. And there was not a vacant seat in that place. Everybody was dead set. You couldn't even, people were like, I'm not even going to the bathroom. I'm going to hold it. I'm making sure I don't miss a second of this. Jensen, I mean, shoot. You would have thought it was a Taylor Swift concert. You got to be flipping my flapjacks. Now, there's a bunch of big things that happened. The biggest thing I thought personally, was actually when they were speaking about what they're going to do and the progress they're going to make in regards to robots, okay? NVIDIA is working to bring AI robots to real life. On Monday, the chip maker announced the Project Groot foundation AI model built to create better performing humanoid robots. NVIDIA also unveiled a system on a chip named Thor to be used for robots. The quote, the enabling technologies are coming together for leading robotics around the world to take giant leaps toward artificial general robots. Oh, maybe that Tesla robot thing might end up actually being something after all. Groot-powered robots will be designed to understand human language and emulate human movements through observation. Now, it was fascinating because it's all like kind of hit me and I put all the pieces together while I was doing something so simple, but yes, so freaking complicated. While I had my headphones on listening to this, right? So, I'm eating chips and salsa while I'm doing this, right? And my first off, it was like the end of the bag, when you get down to the end of the bag of chips and it's like broken little teeny pieces and they're like all these different sizes and like little pieces and stuff like that, right? And I got my spoon and I'm putting the salsa on and I'm listening to Jensen talk about what they're going to do to change the robotics industry. And I was thinking about how complicated what I was doing was. I'm having to get the perfect amount of salsa, put it on the chip at the perfect angle, without spilling it all, right? Put it in my mouth, and I was thinking about how ridiculously complicated it is. There's no one other than humans can do what I was doing there, right? There's no other animal that could like perfectly get the spoon, put the perfect amount of salsa so it doesn't spill all over the place, and at the right angle and all those sorts of things. And there's no robot today that can do that. And that's kind of sad. There's no robot on the planet that could actually just go up there and move as naturally as I move and do it as quick as I do it and whatnot. It's impossible today for such a simple task. And yet machines can do the most complicated math that you could ever conceive. And a machine could beat me at chess in less than 30 seconds. But yet it couldn't do what I was doing in terms of putting the perfect amount of salsa on a chip and just eating it and just making it look very natural, right? What I think is an easy task, but ultimately is a ridiculously complicated task. And us humans, we do these ridiculously complicated things on an everyday basis. I mean, think about driving, for instance, right? I mean, look at how much trouble almost everybody's basically thrown in the towel in regards to trying to create cars that drive themselves. Tesla's one of the few that's actually standing strong and like, we're going to actually figure this out and we're going to solve this. And even Tesla still is trying to figure out the last 1% to 2%. They spend ridiculous sums of money. So us humans, we do these ridiculously complicated things, and you've got to get better at training the models so then they can basically emulate exactly how we do. And I imagined like a robot basically just acting as natural as I do and just doing what I do and those sorts of things. And all that is going to end up happening through NVIDIA chip systems over time. And so that's what's actually needed to, I think, have the robot industry really take off in a real way. So it's something other than just, we're moving this car door from here to over here. Okay, if we're going to take this to a real huge scalable level, we've got to have the training systems to train these things. No different than OpenAI can train across massive amounts of images, videos, text conversations, and things like that. This is like training in the real world, like how humans interact, how humans move, and those sorts of things, right? So that's obviously what's needed. Now, then, in my opinion, I don't think a lot of people are even going to understand what was going on there in regards to robotics. That to me was the biggest thing. I'm like, that's crazy. Like that's the biggest game changer. But what I think some people will begin to understand is we need bigger GPUs. NVIDIA on Monday announced a new generation of artificial intelligence chips and software running AI models. The new AI graphics processors, named Blackwell, are expected to ship later this year. The announcement comes as companies and software makers still scramble to get their hands on the current generation of H100 chips, right? Now, I could go through all the stats and data, but I don't even think like 90% plus of people would understand all those, what we're going to go through. The bottom line is understand these Blackwell chips are ridiculously powerful. They can do way more than like anybody could imagine. Let's put it that way. Amazon Web Services is going to build a server cluster worth 20,000 of these chips. And it's insane. And you think about how expensive these chips are going to be. I mean, my gosh, guys. When we're talking these customers are spending money, we're talking they're spending, on some of these new chips, they could be easily spending $50,000, $100,000 a chip for some of these new generation chips, right? It's insane. NVIDIA didn't provide a cost for the new GB200 or the system it's used in. NVIDIA's Hopper-based H100 costs between $25,000 and $40,000 per chip, with the whole systems costing as much as $200,000 according to analyst estimates, right? The bottom line is these new chips are going to be far more expensive than the old chips. You think NVIDIA is going to sell those much more powerful chips for a cheaper cost? No, they're going to sell them for much more expensive cost, right? The companies are forced to buy them because if they don't, their competitors will get ahead of them. So you either spend and you buy the most powerful things or you will fall behind, right? So ultimately, what I came to the conclusion with here is NVIDIA's revenue train is not stopping this year. It's not stopping next year either. I think at this point in time, if you're thinking about NVIDIA going backwards with revenue, I think you've got to push all the way out to 2026 at this point in time. And, if you're bearish on NVIDIA, you've got to hope maybe in 2026 their revenues start going down to 2027. Because looking at this logically, I don't see NVIDIA's revenue train stopping. Not this year, and probably not next now at this point in time, folks. Because I'm telling you, they're going to sell these chips for a lot more. The big dogs are all basically, like I said, forced to buy them. It's not like you really have an option to say, oh, no, I'm going to skip that. Okay, skip that and get beat. It's not like there's an option there. You skip it, you get beat, right? Now, this might be even bigger than the first two things I took you through in terms of what it means for NVIDIA's stock price, okay? Stock price, now we're talking. Business model, now we're talking. NVIDIA Inference Microservice. NVIDIA also announced it's adding a new product named NIM, which stands for NVIDIA Inference Microservice, to NVIDIA Enterprise Software Subscription. I'll explain why this is huge in just a moment. NIM makes it easier to use older NVIDIA GPUs for inference or process of running AI software and will allow companies to continue to use the hundreds of millions of NVIDIA GPUs they already own. Inference requires less computational power than the initial training of new AI model. NIM enables companies that want to run their own AI models instead of buying access to AI results as a service from companies like OpenAI. The strategy is to get customers who buy NVIDIA-based servers to sign up for NVIDIA's Enterprise, which costs $4,500 per GPU per year for a license. $4,500 per GPU per year. And folks, that's basically like straight profit, okay? And when you take into account the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even more GPUs that these big customers have, maybe even in the millions, and you run the math on that, oh my gosh, NVIDIA is going to start banking money off software. People have been wondering, how's NVIDIA going to make money off software? And now it's starting to become a little more clear that NVIDIA is going to be making huge money. Not this year. This year, even next year, you won't see like crazy software money, but as you get into 26, 27, and future years, that money's going to start pouring in, right? So this is absolutely massive. And the reason it's so massive for the stock price is NVIDIA's always been a stock that's Mr. Up and Down, I call it, right? Look at the movements of the stock. It'll be up 125% and then the next year down 50%, right? It was up 81% and then down 30%. It was up 131% and then it was down 17, 10, and 10, right? And so that's NVIDIA. It's one of these stocks that would always go through some insane bullish cycles and then some insane bearish cycles. And the reason being is because they were only hardware related. Well, now that NVIDIA could start pouring in money on the software side, right? It will start to slowly be viewed as more of a SaaS-like business model with chips on top of it. It'll start to be viewed a little bit more like Apple is nowadays. And Apple gets this huge premium on the stock. Microsoft gets a huge premium on the stock. Did you know Microsoft's forward PE is around the same as NVIDIA? Did you know that? Now, that should not be. Microsoft's got decent growth. NVIDIA's got ridiculous growth. Microsoft's a stable, good company. NVIDIA's a game-changing, world-changing company. There's a difference, right? And so those stocks shouldn't even trade remotely close to the same forward piece. But they do because people say, NVIDIA, maybe it goes up another 100% from here, but then it's going to have a big 50% crash, right? Because it's so hardware related. If all of a sudden you can start pouring in the money, regardless if people are ordering chips at that point in time or not, oh my gosh, you're doing awesome. And so this is a huge game changer for NVIDIA stock price. Now, another thing became apparent to me watching Jensen on that stage here today. And, obviously Steve Jobs was the guy, right? He was seen as the leader when it came to technology for really since the late 90s all the way until, his passing in 2011. And he was really seen as the guy that could somehow make nothing out of something. Or something out of nothing, I should say. He could somehow make something out of nothing, right? He was seen as this guy that just could create a new industry, get the people together to work on this, and just, it's like something that wasn't there before, and all of a sudden it's this huge thing. And it's like, how did that happen? I mean, there was nothing there, and now it's all of a sudden this big thing, right? And obviously I would say he's the most critical person to the mobile revolution, right? Tablets, smartphones, all those sorts of things. If he's not there, do those things ever take off the way they did without Apple? I don't know. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. We'll never know, the answer to that, right? But it became very apparent that Jensen is the Jobs of the modern day, right? It became very apparent to me that he's got the world's attention. He is the coolest in regards to the tech sector. Everybody really wants what he has. And he's helping make these new industries and these new things happen that people are just like, dang, I couldn't imagine that, right? And just having those moments where it's like, whoa, they're doing what? Like that's crazy. Those iPhone type moments when you saw that phone for the first time and Steve Jobs showed that off and it was like, what? What is this? This is crazy. This is insane. This is awesome. And Jensen's now doing that with his events, right? And so that became apparent to me as well watching that, right? Now, next thing I'll say is, I'm going to quote this, okay? It's a cheat code of a company. It's a Jeremy Lefebvre quote right there, okay? It's a cheat code of a company. NVIDIA is a cheat code. Their workforce is so good and their leader is so good at that company that every time you try to count them out, they come up with the next big thing that's way bigger than the last thing was. And I've watched NVIDIA over this past decade. It's actually more than a decade now at this point in time. And they've just done it again and again and again. Every time you think, NVIDIA's best growth days are behind it, they come out with something new. And the new thing is way bigger, way better, and way more impactful to the company than the last thing was. It's a cheat code of a company. And so if you think today was the last time NVIDIA is ever going to show off some new way of making money on the hardware side or the software side, you're sorely mistaken. This is not the last time, and they're going to have another event and another event, and at the end of the day, keep growing that business bigger and bigger and bigger, right? Now, the other fascinating thing with NVIDIA is the stock doesn't trade rich. And I spoke about kind of, this versus Microsoft. I mean, the stocks trade somewhat in the same ballpark in terms of forward P, and that just shouldn't be like that, right? Because of NVIDIA's growth rates. And to see this company trading at, let's call it roughly a 38 forward P right now, when I think about the revenue and margin and net income opportunity this company has over this next many years, because remember, these trends we're talking about here, this isn't going away. Like, they're just getting bigger and bigger, right? The need for AI chips is not like just going to go away. Like, that's going to become a much bigger need 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 7 years from now, 10 years from now to train robots. Like, we're still in first inning of that game, second inning of that game. Imagine where that's going to be many years out. And so the forward P here, I'm like, NVIDIA should be trading at least double or triple that forward P here today, folks. You look at this company, gross margins, 75% plus. You're looking at net margins, 50% plus. I mean, these are just ridiculous numbers, right? So I'm starting to view NVIDIA very similar to an Amazon or Meta type company. It needs to be in every single portfolio. It really does. And so that puts me in this position with the public count. I've got to start a position in NVIDIA in the public count. I've got to do it. Like, I just feel like I can't not be part of this. When I think about how much growth this company has over this next decade, to just say, oh, the stock's up a lot in the past year, so therefore I don't want to buy it. It's just a very caveman-like mentality. Oh, the stock's up a lot, I don't want to buy it. No. At the end of the day, you got to look at the valuation, and you got to think about where this company's growth is going over this next 5-10 years. And I see a very bright next 5 to 10 years for NVIDIA, and I see a company that you can't compete with them. You can't compete with them. The more I've watched over, especially over this past year and a half, the more I'm like, companies like Intel and AMD are behind. They're way behind. And then, believe me, all these other big tech companies would love to eliminate NVIDIA so they don't have to spend so much with NVIDIA all the time in terms of these chips. But, you hear about Meta trying to compete and create their own chips, and Tesla and other companies I personally own. I'm just going to tell you, it's not happening. NVIDIA's out in front of all these guys by many times years. So these other companies are trying to catch up to maybe, let's say, an H100. By the time you catch up to that H100, NVIDIA's already 2-3 chips past that. So you're playing like a game of trying to catch somebody's shadow. And if anything, I'm looking at NVIDIA, I'm like, they might actually be extending the lead here rather than these other guys catching up. And so what they've got going on there is magical. That's all I can say. They got the magic. They got the magic. And it feels like a stock that I have to have in my portfolio. Because at the end of the day, do I think NVIDIA is going to 400 or do they think it's going to 1,500? I think it's going to 1,500. And the more I think about this, the more I think about it, years ago I made a prediction that I thought NVIDIA would be a $10 trillion plus company someday, market cap wise. And the more I'm looking at it, I'm like, I can actually see it. I can actually see how NVIDIA becomes a $10 trillion plus company. When you start running the numbers, now you got the subscription service, right? $4,500 per year per chip. And you think about the cash flows that are going to start pouring in, that if they choose to, they can use it on share buybacks. They've got arguably the most talented tech team in the world. If they don't have the most, it's certainly one of them. They're going to have so much cash flow coming in over this next few years that if they want to buy out other game-changing companies that could help them expand into other verticals, they can do that. So I'm just looking at it across the board, and I'm like, I can see it. Like, I can literally see how this company becomes a $10 trillion plus company. I think it's going to pass Microsoft. I think it's going to pass Apple in terms of market cap. And from there, if anything, it could accelerate its lead. And so, we'll see. All I know is, man, oh man, I've been telling people since the stock was like 150, don't get in the way of this thing. It's a freight train. And then people are still trying to get in the way of it. Next one, looking forward to getting into, here's why NVIDIA stock is trading lower. This should be very interesting.
Along with our own Christina Partsinevelos, who is also there at the Developers Conference. Stacey, the stock is down a little bit today. Do you think it's just, it did add $1 trillion in market value this year. What do you think the market's reacting to?
Look, so the hype into this event was pretty massive. I've never seen anything quite like this before. I mean, they literally sold out the S&P Center yesterday. It was more reminiscent, of a Taylor Swift show than an event.
No, sir. Swiftie would be at a stadium, okay?
So I think that's it. Like, we were expecting to hear news flow on specs and everything else for the new GPU architectures and everything. We heard everything that we were looking for.
Oh, look at this. I like this. This is awesome. This is awesome. Wall Street firms that have over $1,000 price target. Bernstein 1,000, Wedbush 1,000, Benchmark 1,000, Mizuho's 1,000, unknown. Okay. West Park Capital a little over 1,000. Bank of America is at 1,100. Okay. KeyBank 1,100. Truist is nearly 1,200. 1,177. Well, they just want to be cool. Like, come on, man. Keep it at normal numbers. Loop Capital 1,200. These guys are at 1,250. Rosenblatt 1,400. And yeah, I mean, if I had to put a 12-month price target, I would be, I'd probably slap a 1,500 on it. Either that or 2,000 if I had to put a 12-month price target.
I don't know that we heard anything that we weren't necessarily expecting. It looks like a great chip. I think everybody expected that. And so that's why it's selling off. And frankly, the whole space is selling off today a little bit. Like, it's not actually underperforming the broader semiconductor industry.
And now it's up.
So I think it's just taking a little bit of a breather.
Christina, what are your top takeaways?
Dang, that's crazy. It's actually climbed $40 a share. Because if it was $8.96, right? When I opened it right now, $8.96, and it was $8.56 at this point just a few hours ago. So $40 a share in a quick amount of time.
Interview from hearing Jensen, from being there.
Just from the interview, the biggest thing right now is that he just added a price tag to the Blackwell chip. I'm waiting to confirm with the PR team for NVIDIA on which particular chip, because like you guys talked about, Blackwell is a AI platform on there. There's going to be various chips provided over the next year or so. And so Jensen held up a Blackwell platform, and he said between $30,000 to $40,000, which to me, I was expecting it to be a little bit more. And I know Stacy too. I've seen his notes. A lot of analysts have weighed in saying anywhere between $40,000 to $50,000, at least 30% higher than the previous H100 chip. So if that's the case, it could be good for margins if demand keeps up. So that's a strong takeaway from yesterday. Yeah, it was a sold out event, celebrities, all of that. But I think the message that we got from NVIDIA is that they're not just the hardware company, they're providing the full stack solution. Jensen just mentioned that, and that's going to make switching costs a lot harder should you choose to leave NVIDIA in a few years and go to, let's say, the in-house options that a lot of mega cap tech players are trying to work on, or the likes of AMD or Intel eventually, hopefully, who knows?
Right. Yeah, the creation of the ecosystem. Stacey, do you see that as well? And how important does that become in terms of the models that you build to figure out what this company is going to be earning in years to come?
Yeah, so the ecosystem is hugely important, right? You have to remember, they do everything. They do the chips. They do the hardware, they do the software, they do the networking, they do everything. There isn't a single other company on the planet that does.
They put the whole thing together, baby.
They do everything that's around the chip, and it creates a tremendous amount of lock-in. People have been talking about their software ecosystem. It's called CUDA. They've been doing this for well over 10 years. Every other competitor recognizes that. Every other competitor has sort of a crash course now to try to improve their software offerings. So the problem is that you're fighting against a player that has been entrenched for over a decade. There's a massive installed base that's already there. There's millions of developers that can already program on NVIDIA's platforms. It's a very, very broad moat that is very hard to crack. And I think most of the other players out there are discovering that.
Yeah. Stacey, just something I'd love you to be able to explain to me and our viewers.
So let me tell you a big mistake everybody's making in regards to AMD and NVIDIA. Okay? Big mistake. And I've seen so many people making this mistake. So many people have been buying AMD stock because they're like, oh, AMD's going to catch up to NVIDIA and all these sorts of things. The best alpha, likely, if you're going to compare NVIDIA and AMD, it's likely still NVIDIA. Just because AMD has a cheaper share price does not mean it's a better opportunity, it's a better deal in the market. You go look at the forward Ps of those companies, and you go look at the growth rates of those companies, right? And it's clear as day, NVIDIA is decimating AMD, like in a massive way. Look at AMD's growth rates over this past year. Look at NVIDIA. Like, NVIDIA's winning the battle and they're winning the war. That's the thing you got to understand about this. That doesn't mean there's not a place for AMD. But if you want to think people are thinking AMD is going to outperform NVIDIA over the coming years, and I'm like, I don't think so. It looks to me like 100% NVIDIA's winning the battle, and they're winning the war in the end. And so I think that's just a little food for thought. Just because one share price is more expensive than the other does not mean the other one's a better opportunity, okay? And so I just think that's a big mistake that a lot of folks are making out there that maybe don't understand exactly what's going on right now.
Consumption, because we've talked about it a lot, sort of in the broader context of data centers, but I know the introduction of this platform was accompanied by saying that it consumes a lot less power for more computing. But explain really what's going on here, because I got a little bit lost.
Yeah, no, so on a per workload basis, every architecture that they introduce is much more efficient. And I think they said something, it could be as much as 25 times the efficiency of operating. Take those with a grain of salt. I mean, like, fine, they're going to throw out, like good big numbers, but it should be more efficient on a per workload basis. On an absolute basis, though, these things do use a lot of power because you're cramming more and more compute into these data centers, and so you're actually dragging a lot more power on an absolute basis into these. It's actually like something that may become an issue, like broadly for the space. Like, how do you get the absolute amount of power that's required into these data centers to do the compute? But given the amount of compute that they're doing with them on a per workload basis, much more efficient, much more cost effective with every generation. So we need to get the power in there, though.